It's Liberation Day, folks. It's Liberation Day.
With Foxconn to build a server factory in Texas by 2026.
The company says it is now planning to invest $500 billion in the U.S. economy.
The CEO of SoftBank pledging to invest $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years.
This is President Trump delivering on the promise he made to the American people on the campaign trail.
The idea is come to America, build greatness in America, build for the American customers.
Project Stargate.
It's a joint venture between SoftBank, Oracle, and OpenAI, and they're going to create a data center that will eventually be expanded to other states.
Shows people are listening to Mr. Trump's pitch to bring new industry to America.
This is the latest pledge from a foreign business leader promising to spend big in the U.S. as a result of Trump's election victory.
Founder of the property development company DeMac Properties is pledging the money.
President Trump announcing $100 billion investment from Taiwan Semiconductor, bringing the company's total American investments to $165 billion.
The most powerful.
The thing about all of this that I am still genuinely confused by is that as a leftist, I am not against trade protectionist moves. I'm not a free trader, okay? As much as I love how much China has been able to develop as a consequence of that free trade, I'm not a free trader. Okay, I'm not. So I'm not inherently anti-tariffs. This is something that I have talked about quite frequently on this broadcast ever since the tariff stuff happened. Having said that, there's two things that don't make any sense. One, broad tariffs across the board against every single country is insane. It's just stupid. It's just not like it doesn't make sense. It literally does not make sense from a right-wing perspective. It does not make sense from a left-wing perspective. It just simply does not make sense. I'm sorry. I know Giannis Varoufakis tries to find like the 5D chess move behind all of this, but like it still does not make sense. The reason why it doesn't make sense is because some materials are not, they just don't exist here, okay? Some of the goods that we need to bring into the country simply do not exist in the United States of America. A lot of goods that maybe used to be previously manufactured in the United States of America don't get manufactured in the United States of America any longer, so there's no competent, competitive domestic manufacturing capabilities in this country. So this is precisely the reason why it kind of doesn't make sense. Like it makes sense for the UAW to be on board with these tariffs because they are a domestic car manufacturer, okay? If the goal ultimately is to beef up U.S. manufacturing, then great. Obviously, I have issues with that as well because I wish that, and this is not about the UAW, but more so like Ford and all these American manufacturers, like I wish they would also focus their efforts on making perhaps maybe smaller cars, safer cars, nicer cars in general, electric vehicles that are competitive with like the Chinese EV scene. It's impossible to do at this point regardless, but like, you know, those are different issues. But in terms of the pure economics of this, I understand why a Bernie Sanders style presidency would engage in a similar act. They'd probably get assassinated before they fucking completed it. But I understand why someone would do trade protectionism, especially as it pertains to competitive domestic manufacturing capability having sectors like cars. One of the few, it's basically one of the few industries that exists in this country that is not about making baby murder machines. Ironically enough, you can make the argument that cars are baby murder machines because they're so high and so large, so they definitely run over pedestrians, specifically pedestrians under a certain height, i.e. children. But that's not the point I'm making right now. That's not the point I'm making currently. I'm not going to be making that point. But it still doesn't make sense what he's doing. It does not.
AI chips in the world will be made right here in America.
Things happen so quickly in the Trump world, right? It's 100 days. Right. It feels like it's 100 months. This is leadership. This is taking control of the problem for military, for everything, for industrial, for our economy. Even if it causes short-term pain, the reality is it is the right decision.
NVIDIA says it will invest hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 4 years, part of the manufacturing renaissance under President Donald J. Trump.
Furniture maker Prepack are shifting their operations from Canada to North Carolina.
Johnson & Johnson.
UAW fucked people supporting Trump? No. The UAW does not broadly support Trump. The UAW, on the other hand, does support these tariffs, specifically ones that are placed upon car manufacturers. The reason why the UAW supports that is because it is comprised, not entirely, but a big chunk of UAW is, as is the name, United Auto Workers. They are auto manufacturers, an auto manufacturing labor union. Yeah, of course they're going to support trade protectionism that will inevitably yield larger and larger initiatives to build more automobiles in the United States of America. Why wouldn't they support that? That makes sense. Yeah, that part makes sense. I don't even have necessarily an issue with the automobile tariffs in general. Will it lead to price increases? Yes, unless you also force these companies not to increase their prices. I don't know if Donald Trump is going to be able to do that. Who knows? Okay, and then you have a potential capital strike. There's just a lot of complications here because any kind of inherently anti-profit initiative that you engage in a country like the United States of America is going to have a lot of backlash and a lot of issues. Having said that, this right here, like what he's doing is the weirdest way to implement these tariffs because they're broad tariffs across the board, country by country. It's not even sector specific. It's not industry specific. It just does not make sense.
Johnson says it will invest more than $55 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years.
Hyundai announced a $20 billion.
It especially doesn't make sense because we're talking about Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump obviously is an anti-NAFTA president. He ran and successfully won because he was anti-NAFTA. And then when he did actually win the first term, he basically did NAFTA too. He continued free trade with Canada and Mexico. Ironically enough, Trump too, he has a different attitude now, okay? Because he did that. He did another version of NAFTA when he was the president. That was the first thing that he implemented, okay? The USMCA. Now, what's interesting about this is this time it seems like he's trying to go against that, but it doesn't make sense as to why he would go against that because you're a right-wing guy. Like, why are you anti-free trade? It's shocking. I'm anti-free trade. Trump shouldn't be, but even when he's anti-free trade, he's not even anti-free trade in the appropriate way. He's still anti-free trade in a way where it does not make any sense. It especially doesn't make sense when you consider the fact that Donald Trump also is not pro-labor. He's not pro-labor unions at all. He literally stopped the collective bargaining capacity for 1 million plus federal workers a couple weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago. He did that with a stroke of a pen. It's crazy.
Investment.
With your leadership, Mr. President, Hyundai Motor Group is proud to be a stronger partner in America's industrial future.
This is the automobile industry.
Could you explain your view on free trade? I think that collaborative trade is great. It's fantastic. But obviously, a big part of why American manufacturing output was eviscerated, with the exception of, like, I guess, national defense. And even then, you have a lot of cutouts where you can work with American allies, which happens to be the entire country. I mean, the entire planet, with the exception of, I guess, like China, Iran, Cuba, and a couple countries like Venezuela. Like, there is no manufacturing base in this country. There used to be. It's important to have factories. Look at fucking Germany. Do you see what I'm saying? Look at Germany. Why is Germany still the industrial powerhouse that is the economic engine that drives the European Union? It's because they still have factories. They still have jobs. They still have things that they're building. Germany, as it stands, is still very much the industrial powerhouse of Europe. It is the economic engine that drives Europe. And the reason for that is because they still have manufacturing capabilities. But my point is that ultimately NAFTA and these kinds of free trade agreements eviscerated, they destroyed the American working class. They did. And that built a lot of resentment against the Democrats, who were seen as being responsible for implementing these free trade agreements, ironically enough, even though it is a uniparty principle, and it was certainly backed by the Republicans initially. So for that reason, Donald Trump was able to develop a lot of clout amongst these non-college educated white working class individuals who haven't really had a good paying job in decades at this point. That's what destroyed this country's manufacturing capabilities, because there was not necessarily capital flight, but I guess you could consider it capital flight. They moved their manufacturing to China. They moved their manufacturing overseas. Now, trade protectionism is a necessity to ensure that that does not happen. It should have happened back then. Of course, it never did. And multiple decades later, after you have designed this global web, of trade, you're turning around and going, yeah, we're gonna break it entirely. That is always going to be a difficult situation. That's always going to be an incredible, mountainous task to defeat, especially when you're a right-wing guy, especially when you're seemingly on the side of capital. It just doesn't make any sense the way he's doing this. I don't know if he is capable of undermining China as like the industrial hub by making, by trying to bring back manufacturing to the United States of America. I like the idea of bringing back manufacturing into the United States of America. I literally use domestic labor union manufacturing with my fucking merchandise, okay? I am a socialist. I'm a leftist. I'm pro trade unionist. I'm anti-capitalist. Of course I like fucking American manufacturing. I want American manufacturing to grow. I want there to be competent, competitive, domestic manufacturing in this country with good paying labor union jobs, with good benefits. That is the whole project, okay? Now, because of that, I'm not going to immediately say tariffs are bad, ironically enough, as I have said time and time again since Trump announced that he was going to do fucking, tariffs over and over again. The problem with Trump's tariffs is not that he is implementing tariffs across the board. The problem with Trump's tariffs is that he's doing it for seemingly no fucking real reason. And he's doing it with no competent manufacturing output at the domestic level. So for the UAW side, it makes sense. But if you look at anything else, or even if you look at certain car parts or certain goods that are necessary for cars to even be built, like all of a sudden you're beefing up the prices. You're immediately boosting the prices across the board because everything in this current global web of trade, everything, even without free trade agreements with like Canada or Mexico, still crosses many different borders before they come to the United States of America.
Now those plants largely have stopped and they're moving them to our country. Honda is building one of the biggest plants.
The trade story is certainly picking up speed here and pushing more countries to...
I think one of the biggest ironies here is that this is the one thing that will cause Americans to rise up and take up arms against the current administration, no matter who is running the show. Even Donald Trump, who has a cult, right? You cannot touch America's treats. Treats have to be affordable and accessible. That is the one thing that you cannot touch. And this actually touches the treats. J.D. Pondon says treat rights will suffer. Permanent first world genocide, says J.D. Pondon. No more treats. The suburbs will cry tears of blood. That's what he's doing.